For 4 years, Elias clung to the only clue in his son's disappearance, a haunting trail cam image of a coyote carrying little Owen's teddy bear. He'd accepted the official story, a tragic accident in the vast wilderness of the Absaroka Range. But when a hunter emails him a new photo, taken just last week 80 miles north, his world shatters. It's the same bear, with the same missing button eye, sitting on the porch of a remote cabin that belongs to his own brother. What would you do if the one piece of evidence that defined your grief for years turned out to be the start of a lie? It's a question most of us never have to face, but for one father, it became a terrifying reality. The silence in Elias's small apartment was a physical weight. It had been his constant companion since his wife Clara had left 2 years ago, unable to live in a house where every corner held a ghost. But Elias couldn't leave. He felt that abandoning the home would be like abandoning Owen all over again. So he stayed, surrounded by the faint crayon marks on the wall and the silence that screamed his son's name. The original trail cam photo was framed on his desk. Not the whole picture, just a cropped, enhanced image of the bear. Barnaby, Owen had called him. Its plastic button eye, which Elias had sewn back on a week before the picnic, stared out from the photo, a glossy, unblinking witness. For 1,460 days, that photo was the end of the story. It was proof of a cruel, random act of nature. It was horrible, but it was a conclusion. It allowed the world to move on, even if he couldn't. Now, his laptop screen showed a different picture. This one was in color, taken in the sharp light of a mountain morning. A rickety wooden porch, a pair of muddy boots by the door, and there, propped against a log railing, sat Barnaby. The fur was matted and faded, but it was him. The left ear flopped at the same angle, and the black thread of the reattached button eye was unmistakable. Elias's heart hammered against his ribs. The email was from a man named Cal Jensen. He wrote that he was a hunter who maintained a few trail cameras in the area to track game. He'd seen the missing child posters for Owen years ago, even though the official search was long over. He said the bear looked familiar, and on a hunch, he searched old news articles online, found the original photo, and realized it was a match. He included the coordinates of the cabin and a final, chilling sentence. The place belongs to a guy named Daniel Thorne. Figured you should know. Daniel, his brother. A hot, acidic feeling rose in Elias's throat. It couldn't be. It was a coincidence. Someone found the old bear, maybe miles from where the coyote dropped it, and it ended up at Daniel's cabin. It had to be. But the bitter memory of their last conversation before Owen vanished played in his mind. It was about their parents' will. Elias, the responsible older brother, had inherited the family home and the bulk of their savings. Daniel, who had a history of bad investments and a bitter disposition, received a smaller, though still significant, cash sum. "You always got everything," Daniel had snarled over the phone. "The golden boy, Dad's favorite. Well, enjoy the house. Enjoy everything he gave you." Elias hadn't spoken to him since the funeral, where Daniel had offered clumsy, distant condolences before disappearing again into his own troubled life. With a shaking hand, Elias scrolled through his contacts and found his brother's number. He hadn't dialed it in years. It rang 4 times, then went to a terse, automated voicemail. "Daniel, it's Elias. Call me. It's important." He hung up, the words feeling pathetic and small. He couldn't wait. He opened a map application and punched in the coordinates from Cal's email. The location that appeared was a tiny, isolated speck deep in the Shoshone National Forest, a place you didn't get to by accident. You had to want to be there. Hope, a feeling so dangerous and unfamiliar it felt like poison, began to mix with the dread. He had to go. He couldn't go to the police, not yet. What would he say? My son was taken by a coyote 4 years ago, but I found his teddy bear on my brother's porch. They would think his grief had finally broken him. They would tell him to get help, to accept reality. No, this was something he had to do himself. He grabbed his keys, his wallet, and the old, framed photo of Barnaby. He was going to get an answer. The drive was a 5-hour blur of highways, turning into county roads, then gravel, then little more than a dirt track, winding through endless miles of pine and aspen. The Absaroka Mountains loomed around him, beautiful and menacing. This was the same wilderness that had supposedly taken his son. The thought made him sick. He parked his truck at a small, unmarked trailhead a mile from the cabin's location, just as Cal had advised in a follow-up email. "He'll hear a truck coming from miles away up there," Cal had written. The air was thin and cold. Elias started walking, his city shoes slipping on the loose rock. Every snap of a twig made him jump. He wasn't a woodsman like Daniel. He was a high school history teacher. But a primal, protective instinct he thought had died with Owen was now roaring back to life. As he got closer, he could smell wood smoke. The track opened into a small clearing, and there it was. The cabin was exactly as it looked in the photo, a simple, rustic structure that seemed to grow out of the mountainside. And on the porch, propped against the railing, was the bear. Seeing it in person felt like a punch to the gut. It was real. This whole nightmare was real. He crept to the edge of the clearing, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. He hid behind a thicket of firs, his breath fogging in the cold air. What was he going to do? Just walk up and knock? Accuse his brother of the unthinkable? Before he could decide, the cabin door creaked open. Daniel stepped out. He looked older, his face leaner and harder, his beard unkempt. But it was him. He stretched, then turned back to the doorway. "Leo, breakfast is ready," he called out. A moment later, a small boy with sandy blonde hair stepped onto the porch. He looked to be about 6 or 7 years old. He was wearing a red sweater and jeans, and he moved with a nervous energy. Elias felt the world tilt on its axis. He could barely breathe. The boy's hair was the same color as Owen's. His face, it was rounder, older, but the shape of his eyes, the set of his chin, it was him. It was Owen. Elias's mind reeled. Leo? Daniel had renamed him. He had stolen his son and given him a new life, a new name, erasing Elias from his existence. The rage that had been simmering inside him exploded. All the grief, the pain, the 4 years of silent suffering coalesced into a single white-hot point. He stepped out from behind the trees, his legs unsteady. "Daniel!" he called out, his voice cracking. His brother spun around, his eyes wide with shock. Then they narrowed with pure, venomous hatred. The boy, Leo, flinched and hid behind Daniel's legs, peering out at the stranger. "Elias!" Daniel spat, his hand instinctively going to the boy's shoulder. What are you doing here? You're trespassing." "Trespassing?" Elias's voice rose, shaking with disbelief and fury. "You stole my son!" He took a step forward, his eyes locked on the child hiding behind his kidnapper. "Owen?" he said, his voice softening. "Owen, it's me. It's Dad." The boy just stared, his face a mask of confusion and fear. He didn't recognize him. Of course he didn't. He was only 2 when he was taken. Daniel pushed the boy further behind him. "His name is Leo," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "And I'm his father. You need to leave. Now." The confrontation Elias had dreaded was here. In the middle of nowhere, with no one to hear him, he stood face to face with the man who had destroyed his life and the child who was the reason for it all. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. The feud over the inheritance wasn't just about money. For Daniel, it was about taking away the one thing Elias had that was truly priceless. He had watched Elias build a family, a life, a legacy. All the things Daniel felt he'd been denied. So he took it. He hid his crime behind an act of nature, using his knowledge of the wilderness to create the perfect, tragic story. He had counted on the wildness of the mountains to be his accomplice, and for 4 years it had worked. But he made one mistake. He kept a souvenir. He kept the bear. "You're not his father," Elias said, his voice steady now, ice cold with certainty. "You're a monster, and you're done hiding." He pulled out his phone. He had no signal, he knew that. But Daniel didn't. He held it up. "I sent our location to the sheriff's department an hour ago. They know I'm here, Daniel. They know what I found." It was a bluff, but it was all he had. For the first time, a flicker of panic crossed Daniel's face. He looked from Elias to the phone, and then down at the boy who was clinging to his leg. The lie was unraveling. The 4-year deception was collapsing in a matter of minutes, all because of a hunter's trail cam and a tattered old teddy bear. The standoff was broken by the distant but distinct sound of a vehicle engine, much larger than a pickup truck, grinding its way up the dirt track. Elias hadn't called the sheriff, but Cal, the hunter, had. After emailing Elias, his conscience had gotten the better of him. He realized what he'd stumbled upon was too serious to be left to a grieving father alone. Daniel's face went pale. The sound of the approaching truck was the sound of his world ending. He grabbed the boy's arm, trying to pull him back inside the cabin, but Elias charged forward. There was no plan, only instinct. He tackled Daniel, sending them both crashing onto the wooden porch. The boy, Leo, screamed, a terrified sound that ripped through the quiet mountain air. Elias wasn't a fighter, but 4 years of repressed agony gave him a strength he didn't know he possessed. He wrestled with his brother, the two of them trading clumsy blows until the heavy-duty truck of a Park County Sheriff's deputy skidded to a stop in the clearing. A uniformed officer stepped out, his hand on his weapon, his eyes taking in the unbelievable scene. 2 men fighting on a cabin porch and a small crying child caught in the middle. In the end, Daniel didn't confess out of remorse. He confessed out of spite. Cuffed in the back of the deputy's car, he laid out the whole ugly story, his words dripping with the same jealousy that had poisoned him for years. He explained how he'd lured Owen away from the picnic with a piece of candy, how he'd used a piece of raw meat to scent the teddy bear and toss it onto a known animal trail, right where he knew a trail camera was set up. He had planned every detail, creating an unbreakable alibi of tragedy. He wanted Elias to suffer, to feel the same gnawing emptiness that he felt every day. The aftermath was quiet and profoundly difficult. Owen, and Elias refused to call him Leo, was physically unharmed, but emotionally he was a stranger. He remembered nothing of his first 2 years of life. To him, the kidnapper was his father, and Elias was a frightening man who had taken him away. There was no joyful reunion, no tearful embrace. There was only the slow, painful process of building a new life from the wreckage of the old one. Clara returned, not as a wife, but as a mother, and together she and Elias worked with therapists to help Owen heal. They moved out of the old house, hoping a new place would hold new memories instead of old ghosts. The days were filled with small, uncertain steps. A shared laugh over a cartoon, a moment of holding hands while crossing the street, a flicker of recognition in Owen's eyes that maybe, just maybe, this new life was where he belonged. One evening, months later, Elias found Owen sitting on his bed, holding Barnaby. Elias had washed the bear, but it was still worn and fragile. "His eye is loose again," Owen said quietly, his first unsolicited sentence to Elias. Elias sat down beside him, his heart aching. "It's okay," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I can fix it. I've done it before. When a crime is born from something as personal as family jealousy, is true justice ever really possible? Or does the emotional damage create a life sentence for everyone involved? We'd be interested to hear your thoughts on this in the comments below. If you found this story compelling, please consider sharing it with someone who appreciates tales of mystery and the unbreakable bond of family. Thank you for listening.